And I normally love talking to Brandon Darby, but I'm actually, at least for this first topic, I'm actually dreading it. As the more I've gotten to know certain people and started to find out more about the world of human trafficking and organ trafficking, I've come to realize that there truly are demons who live among us. Brandon, he's with obviously Cartel Chronicles Breitbart. Brandon, who's La Diabla?
Okay, so this is a member of Cartel Jalisco, works for El Mincho. We've discussed him several times. And she's a woman who, runs a little enterprise for him, where apparently they've been, you ready for this? They've been
Oh,
performing illegal C-sections, doing illegal medical care, killing some pregnant women, harvesting their babies and organs and selling them to people in the U.S. Now, we did not put this in our headline because it's from local news reports, but the local news reports claim that they are selling them to gay couples in the U.S., the babies.
oh,
So it's
God.
getting really sticky and complicated. That said, regardless of who they're selling them to, that's horrific. I would expect there to be charges in the U.S. for people buying babies for about $14,000, and for buying organs from cartels in Mexico. It's pretty wild. So, but that's what's going on.
Okay, that's pretty much the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Can Brandon, for people who are confused, because it's a gigantic market and people have a hard time understanding it, why organs? This is an international criminal affair, and people will have a hard time understanding why. What's happening?
Well, this is what's interesting. So, I was working on a story about China and organ harvesting, and so in the past, right? So what happens is there's a lot of money to be made in harvesting organs and selling organs. People who are dying or have loved ones who are dying and need a kidney or they're willing to pay a lot of money to get an organ. And so the Chinese organ harvesting first showed up because I think it was Israeli doctors. They had patients who were on several years long wait lists for organs, and these patients all of a sudden were like, "Oh, it's okay. I I have my organ." I'm like, "How did you possibly get an organ?" And they're like, "Well, I went to China." So it turns out that China was harvesting organs from political prisoners, from Falun Gong and
Oh,
others, and they were harvesting organs from their political prisoners, and they were selling those on the having people excuse me, who needed organs come there, get the procedure, get the organs put in, and that's what they were doing. And so apparently, Mexican cartels, ever wanting to expand business opportunities, have decided that organ harvesting is right up their alley. But I mean, we've seen this before. They did this with, with hard. And so several cartels, like the Gulf Cartel, began to make as much or more money from migrant smuggling as they were from drugs. So they really became, they'll do anything they can to make money. It's not just the drugs that we call them drug cartels, but really there are a lot of different business enterprises that they're engaged in.
Brandon, again, speaking with Brandon Darby, Cartel Chronicles. So you had told us about that many times before about how some cartels have shifted so much of their business model to hauling illegals over here for a fee. With the crackdown at the border, they have to be in some terrible shape right now, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're in terrible shape. And so branching out and venturing into other areas to make money. And of course, it'll be the most awful, horrendous things you can think of because you have people without a conscience, you know? You have people who, if you don't mind murdering people, then I guess, and you live in a society where you're not held accountable for it. You're usually, then I guess there's a lot of money to be made doing cruel things in the world.
Brandon, can you explain? the China cartel connection, because this is another thing that throws people for a loop. That for some reason China always seems to come up in these conversations. China and the Mexican cartels. China and the Mexican cartels. How did they link up?
Well, you got to think about it. So, if we do everything we can to have proxies and to have relationships all surrounding the borders of China, right? And they're doing everything they can to have proxies and relationships surrounding our border. But cartels make our nation weaker, right? And cartels make the Western Hemisphere weaker. And and you know, of course, China is, when you have, it's not just drug dealers we're talking about. We're talking about paramilitary criminal organizations who have influence and power over the government of Mexico, like over the federal government. El Mencho clearly does have power over that fragile state. Well, of course, our enemies are going to cozy up to the major military power operating within a nation along our border that's fragile and that power that has the ability to get things done in Mexico, has the ability to get things smuggled into the U.S. Of course they are. Um, and that's what we see. We have China. Again, if you're a nation where everything is surveilled and everything is controlled, if your companies are sending major quantities of precursor chemicals for fentanyl into Canada and into Mexico for them to get them here and to make fentanyl, China knows that's happening, right? That isn't, what someone's doing in this country where we have some degree of freedom. I'm not going to say we have freedom because we really don't, but we have a lot more than they do. Um, if someone's doing that in a trailer in the middle of, you know, Big Bend or something, we might not know about it. But in China, when it's major companies and the manufacturing base that's doing this, they know about it. They control everything, right? Their central government does. They surveil everything. So they know about it. So obviously, it's almost like it's a payback for the opium wars or, for what's happened, what the West did to China, decades and decades and centuries ago. It's like it's making us weaker. It's hurting their opponent, and they're sucking it up.
Brandon, last question. Do we ever run into Russian organized crime before? I know it was a major thing back in the day. I know they've been a gigantic international criminal organization for a very long time, but I never hear about it at all. What happened? Did Putin smash those guys out of existence or what?
No, I think what happened is a lot of those guys uh, became more legitimate, you know, um, more legitimate businessmen, but there's still a heavy presence. I think that you would hear more about it. Like if I lived in New York City, I think you would hear a lot more about Russian organized crime. Or if I lived in Seattle, I think you would hear a lot more about Chinese organized crime. You know what I mean? And Asian organized criminal groups. But I live where I live, and so I focus on what's most prevalent here. But I do think that a lot of those guys became oligarchs, and they have some kind of pseudo relationship with their government now, and they're into oil and they're into other things, and probably pretty brutal if you don't accept their bids. But I think that a lot of them, ultimately, a lot of the power base in that ultimately shifted to more legitimate purposes, more legitimate financial
He,
arrangements.
he is Brandon Darby, Cartel Chronicles, Breitbart. Thank you, my brother. As always, I appreciate it.